The sun beat down on Red Hollow like a punishment, turning the dirt streets into ribbons of dust that clung to everything: skin, clothes, hope. Mara Bell stood at the edge of the town square with her arms wrapped tight around her middle, trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear. It never worked. "Look at her," someone whispered, "standing there like a cow at auction." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Mara didn't look up. She'd learned years ago that meeting their eyes only made it worse. The square was packed, every unmarried woman in Red Hollow lined up like dolls on a shelf waiting to be chosen, or not chosen. The men circled slowly, evaluating, discussing. Some of the women preened under the attention. Others looked terrified. Mara just looked down. Her mother hadn't even bothered to help her dress that morning. "What's the point?" she'd said, not unkindly, just matter of fact. "No one's picking you anyway. Might as well save the effort." Mara had dressed herself in the same brown dress she always wore. It was clean, at least. She'd made sure of that. Sheriff Garrett stood on the platform in the center of the square, his belly hanging over his belt, his face red from the heat and from shouting. He'd been shouting a lot today. "This is how we do things in Red Hollow," he bellowed. "A man needs a wife, a woman needs a husband. Simple as that. No more of this nonsense where people wait around hoping for romance." He said the word like it tasted bad. "We do what needs doing." Mara's friend Sarah stood 3 women down from her, pale and shaking. Sarah was pretty, dark hair, clear skin, the kind of figure men noticed. She'd catch someone's eye, probably within the hour. But Mara? Mara was broad-shouldered and heavy, with hands that looked like they belonged to someone who worked in the fields. Which they did. Her face wasn't ugly exactly, but it wasn't the kind men wrote poems about. And in a town like Red Hollow, if you weren't useful or pretty, you were nothing. "First group," Sheriff Garrett announced, "step forward." 5 women moved toward the center of the square. Sarah was among them. Mara stayed where she was, grateful for the delay. The men began their selection. It was brutal in its efficiency. They walked the line, asked a few questions, made their choices. Within 15 minutes, 4 of the 5 women had been claimed. The 5th, a girl named Beth, who couldn't have been more than 17, stood alone with tears streaming down her face. "Anyone?" the sheriff asked. "Beth Connors, good family, young, healthy." A man in his 50s stepped forward. Beth's face went white, but she nodded. What choice did she have? "Next group." Mara's stomach twisted. She was in the next group. "Move," someone hissed behind her. A hand shoved her forward. She stumbled into the square, dirt puffing up around her boots. The crowd's attention shifted to her immediately, and the murmurs started. "Mara Bell? They're really scraping the bottom now. Who'd take her? You'd need a horse just to—" "Quiet," Sheriff Garrett snapped, but there was amusement in his eyes. "Every woman gets her turn. That's the rule." Mara stood with 4 other women. She didn't know their names. She couldn't focus on anything except the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The men approached. One by one, they looked at the women, asked their questions, made their picks. Mara watched as the woman to her left was chosen by a rancher, then the woman to her right by a blacksmith, then the other 2. And then there was just Mara, standing alone, in front of everyone. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed, then tried to cover it. "Well," Sheriff Garrett said. His voice had taken on a jovial tone that made Mara's skin crawl. "Any takers?" Silence. Now, gentlemen. Mara here is strong. She can work. That's worth something." More silence. A few men looked away, embarrassed. Most just stared. "I'll give a tax break to any man willing to say no." The voice cut through the square like a blade. Deep, rough, final. Everyone turned. Colt Maddox stood at the edge of the crowd, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was tall, taller than anyone else in town, with shoulders that looked like they could carry a house. His face was weathered, scarred along the jaw, and his eyes were the kind of gray that looked like a storm waiting to break. He'd been in Red Hollow for 3 months, kept to himself on a ranch 5 miles out. Didn't drink, didn't socialize, Didn't do anything except work his land and occasionally come into town for supplies. The men feared him. The women whispered about him. No one really knew him. Mr. Maddox, Sheriff Garrett said, his smile widening. Glad you could join us. You here to make a selection? No. Then why? I'm here because you sent 3 men to my ranch this morning threatening to burn it down if I didn't show up. The sheriff's smile didn't falter. We all have to participate, Mr. Maddox. That's how community works. This isn't community. This is cruelty. A ripple went through the crowd. No one talked to Sheriff Garrett like that. Strong words, the sheriff said slowly. But you're here now, so make a choice or leave. Colt's jaw tightened. I don't want a wife. Then you're wasting everyone's time. Fine. Colt's eyes swept over the square, not looking at anyone in particular. I'll take the one you're all laughing at. The square went dead silent. Mara's breath stopped. Sheriff Garrett blinked. I'm sorry, what? The woman standing alone. I'll take her. Every head in the square swiveled to Mara. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't understand what was happening. You... The sheriff actually looked confused. You mean Mara Bell? Is that her name? Yes, but then yes, Mara Bell. Someone in the crowd burst out laughing, then another. Within seconds, half the square was roaring with laughter. They thought it was a joke. They thought Colt Maddox, the most intimidating man in Red Hollow, had just made the funniest joke anyone had ever heard. But Colt wasn't laughing. He walked forward, his boots kicking up dust, until he stood directly in front of Mara. Up close, he was even bigger than she'd realized. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You got a problem with that? He asked quietly. She couldn't find words. Her throat had closed up entirely. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to the sheriff. We done? Sheriff Garrett had stopped smiling. You're serious. I don't joke. Mr. Maddox, I appreciate the gesture, but it's not a gesture. It's a choice. You said make a choice. I made one. The sheriff looked at Mara, then back at Colt, then at the crowd, which had gone quiet again. The laughter had died down into confused whispers. Fine, the sheriff said finally. Fine. Mara Bell and Colt Maddox married by law as of this moment. He waved his hand dismissively. Next group. But no one moved. Everyone was still staring. Colt held out his hand to Mara. Can you walk? She nodded numbly. Then come on. She didn't take his hand. She couldn't. Her body wouldn't cooperate. But she did manage to put one foot in front of the other, following him as he turned and walked away from the square. Behind them, the whispers erupted into full conversations. Did that really just happen? He picked her? It's got to be some kind of bet. Or punishment. Poor bastard. Mara heard all of it, every word, every laugh, but for the first time in her life, she kept walking anyway. Colt's horse was tied up outside the general store, a massive black gelding that looked like it could trample someone without even noticing. Colt untied the reins and glanced at Mara. You ride? She shook her head. He nodded like he'd expected that. Then you're walking. Ranch is 5 miles north. Stay on the road. I'll meet you there. Wait. The word came out strangled. You're leaving me? I'm not leaving you. I'm riding ahead. You've got legs. Use them. I don't know where. North Road. Can't miss it. Only one that goes that direction. He swung up into the saddle with an ease that spoke of years in the saddle. You'll be fine. Why did you do that? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. Colt looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Do what? Choose me. He studied her for a long moment. Because everyone else was being an asshole. Then he kicked his horse into motion and rode away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the street. The walk took 2 hours. Mara's feet ached by the time she saw the ranch house in the distance. A low, sturdy building made of wood and stone surrounded by fenced pastures. There were horses in the fields, maybe a dozen of them, and a barn that looked newer than the house. Colt was waiting on the porch, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. You made it, he said. You didn't think I would? Wasn't sure. He stood and jerked his head toward the door. Come on, I'll show you around. The inside of the house was sparse. A main room with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean but worn, like it had been used hard and maintained carefully. "This is it," Colt said. "You take the room on the left. I'm in the one on the right. There's a well out back for water. Outhouse is past the barn. I eat breakfast at dawn, dinner at dusk. You're welcome to cook if you want. If not, I'll handle it." Mara stood in the middle of the room, feeling completely unmoored. "What do you want from me?" Colt frowned. "What do you mean?" "You chose me. So what do you want? What am I supposed to do?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Nothing." "Nothing?" "Nothing. You want to stay in your room all day? Fine. You want to leave? Fine. You want to work? I'll teach you. But I'm not asking you to be anything except here." "That doesn't make sense." "Doesn't have to." He moved toward his bedroom door. "I'm going to wash up. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry." He disappeared into his room, leaving Mara standing alone in the unfamiliar space. She didn't move for a long time. The first night was the hardest. Mara lay in the narrow bed in her room, which was already more than she'd had in her mother's house, and stared at the ceiling. She kept waiting for Colt to come through the door, to demand something, to explain what he really wanted, but he never came. She heard him moving around once late in the night, but his footsteps went to the kitchen and then back to his room. The door closed quietly. In the morning, she woke to the sound of him making breakfast, eggs and bread, simple but filling. He didn't say anything when she came out, just nodded toward the table. They ate in silence. After breakfast, he stood. "I've got work to do. You can do whatever you want." "What kind of work?" "Fence repair. One of the posts broke in the storm last week." "Can I help?" He looked at her, surprised. "You want to?" "I can't just sit here." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Come on." Well, Mara had worked before. Hard work, farm work. But nothing like this. Colt moved with the kind of efficiency that came from years of doing the same tasks over and over. He didn't waste motion, didn't waste words. He showed her how to dig out the broken post, how to set the new one, how to pack the earth tight around it. When she struggled with the weight of the post, he didn't mock her or take over. He just adjusted his grip and said, "Use your legs, not your back." It took them 3 hours to fix one section of fence. By the end, Mara's hands were blistered and her shoulders screamed, but she'd done it. Colt looked at the finished work and nodded. Good. That was it. Just good. But something in Mara's chest loosened a little. The days fell into a rhythm. Colt worked. Mara learned to work alongside him. He taught her things: how to mend a saddle, how to tell when a horse was favoring a leg, how to read the sky for weather. He didn't explain why he was teaching her these things. He just did. At night, they ate together in silence. Then they went to their separate rooms. It was strange. Not bad, just strange. Mara kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Colt to reveal what he really wanted. But as the days turned into a week, then 2 weeks, nothing changed. He didn't touch her, didn't yell at her, didn't treat her like a burden or a joke or anything except another person who happened to live in the same house. It was the kindest anyone had ever been to her. 3 weeks after the choosing, Mara was in the barn when she heard voices outside. She froze, recognizing one of them, her mother. "I know she's here," her mother was saying, her voice sharp. "I want to see her." "Why?" That was Colt, his tone flat. "She's my daughter." "You didn't seem to care much about that when you shoved her into the square." A pause. "I want to make sure she's all right. She's fine." "Let me see her." "No." Mara's hands were shaking. She set down the bridle she'd been mending and moved toward the barn door. Colt saw her first. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A question, maybe. "Do you want this?" She stepped out into the yard. Her mother looked older than she remembered. Thinner. Tired. "Mara," she said. "There you are." "What do you want?" Mara's voice came out steadier than she expected. "I wanted to check on you. Make sure he's treating you right." Her mother's eyes flicked to Colt with obvious suspicion. He's fine. You sure? Because if he's fine, better than fine. Her mother's mouth thinned. I don't like you being out here all alone with... You didn't care where I was 3 weeks ago. The words hung in the air. Her mother's face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? I did what I thought was best. You weren't going to get any other offers, Mara. At least this way you've got a roof over your head. I had a roof before. Barely. You think I could keep feeding you forever? You're 23 years old. It was time. Mara felt something crack open inside her, something that had been holding back years of quiet, swallowed anger. You could have just said that, she said quietly, instead of letting them laugh at me. I didn't. You did. You stood there and you watched and you didn't say a word. Her mother looked away. I don't know what you want me to say. Nothing. I don't want you to say anything. Mara took a breath. You should go. Mara, go. Her mother looked at Colt as if he might intervene. He didn't. He just stood there, silent and immovable. Finally, her mother turned and walked away. Mara watched her go, feeling strangely hollow. You all right? Colt asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He didn't push. Just went back to whatever he'd been doing before her mother arrived. That night, Mara lay in bed and cried for the first time since the choosing. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time in her life, someone had let her make her own choice, even if that choice was just telling her mother to leave. The next morning, Colt was already up when she came out of her room. He had coffee on the stove and was frying bacon. Morning, he said. Morning. They ate breakfast. Then Colt said, I need to go into town today, pick up supplies. Mara's stomach dropped. Okay. You want to come? She stared at him. What? Town. You want to come? No, I don't think... You can't hide out here forever. I'm not hiding. He raised an eyebrow. Fine, I'm hiding, but I'm not ready to... No one's ever ready. Come on, we'll make it quick. Colt, you don't have to talk to anyone. You don't have to do anything except walk next to me and help carry supplies. That's it. Mara wanted to argue, but something in his tone, not quite a challenge, but close, made her nod. Okay. The ride into town was long. Colt had saddled 2 horses, and Mara had climbed onto one with more confidence than she felt. She'd been practicing in secret over the past few weeks, and while she wasn't good, she could at least stay in the saddle. Colt noticed. You've been riding. It wasn't a question. A little. You're getting better. That was all he said, but it felt like praise. Red Hollow looked the same as it always had, dusty, crowded, loud. As soon as they rode down the main street, people started staring. Mara felt their eyes like physical weight. Colt dismounted and tied up his horse outside the general store. Mara did the same, her hands shaking slightly. Stay close, Colt said quietly. They went inside. The store was busy, women picking through fabric, men arguing over the price of nails. The conversations died the moment Colt and Mara walked in. Mr. Peterson, the store owner, looked up from behind the counter. His expression flickered, surprise, then something that might have been pity. Mr. Maddox, he said carefully, didn't expect to see you today. Need supplies. Of course, I'll just... He glanced at Mara. Mrs. Maddox. The title felt foreign, wrong. Mara didn't correct him. Colt moved through the store with purpose, picking out what he needed. Flour, sugar, nails, rope. Mara followed, aware of every whisper, every glance. Can't believe he actually kept her. I heard she doesn't even know how to cook. Poor man must regret it by now. Mara's face burned, but she kept her head up. Colt didn't seem to hear any of it, or if he did, he didn't care. At the counter, Mr. Peterson tallied up the supplies. That'll be it. The door slammed open. Sheriff Garrett walked in, his eyes sweeping the store until they landed on Colt. Mr. Maddox, he said, his voice carrying. Glad I caught you. Colt didn't turn around. Sheriff. Been meaning to check in. See how married life is treating you. Fine. Really? The sheriff moved closer, Because I've been hearing some interesting things. Rumors that you're keeping that girl of yours locked up out on your ranch, not letting her come to town. She's here now." "So she is." The sheriff's eyes flicked to Mara, and his smile widened. "Mrs. Maddox, you doing all right?" Mara's throat was dry. "Yes." "He treating you well?" "Yes." "You sure? Because if he's not, you just let me know. We'll handle it." Colt finally turned to face the sheriff. "She said she's fine." "I heard her. I'm just making sure." The sheriff's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know how it is, Mr. Maddox. Some men, they get a woman out to their ranch. They think they can do whatever they want. No one around to see. No one around to stop them." The store had gone completely silent. Colt's voice was quiet, dangerous. "What are you accusing me of?" "Nothing. Just checking in, making sure you're following the rules." "I am." "Good." The sheriff stepped back. "Then I'll leave you to it. But just so you know, I'll be keeping an eye on things." He left. The store erupted into whispers. Colt paid for the supplies without a word, then gestured for Mara to follow him outside. She did, her heart pounding. They loaded the horses in silence. Then, as Colt was tying down the last of the supplies, he said quietly, "I'm sorry." Mara blinked. "For what?" "For bringing you here. I thought it would be easier. I was wrong. It's not your fault." "Isn't it?" He looked at her directly. "I chose you, in front of everyone, and now they're watching us like we're some kind of spectacle. They always watch me. Not like this." Mara didn't know what to say to that. Colt finished with the horses and mounted up. "Let's go." They rode out of town in silence. That night, after dinner, Colt didn't go straight to his room. He stayed at the table, staring at his empty plate. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. Mara looked up. "Okay." "I didn't choose you as a joke or to prove a point or because I felt sorry for you." "Then why?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I had a sister, younger than me. She was different, quiet, didn't fit in. People made fun of her." His jaw tightened, and I didn't stop them. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that she'd be fine. Mara's chest ached. "What happened to her?" "She left. Took off in the middle of the night when she was 16. I didn't see her again for 5 years. And when I finally found her," he trailed off. "She wasn't the same. The world had chewed her up and spit her out because she didn't have anyone to protect her." "Colt, I'm not trying to protect you," he said quickly. "I know you don't need that. But when I saw you standing there in that square with everyone laughing," he met her eyes. "I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't just walk away." Mara didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. After a moment, Colt stood. "Anyway, that's why, in case you were wondering." He went to his room and closed the door. Mara sat alone at the table for a long time, thinking about the man who had chosen her, not because she was easy or convenient or anything except someone who needed choosing. And for the first time since that day in the square, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she mattered. The weeks continued to pass. Mara worked alongside Colt, learning more every day. She could mend fences now, could saddle a horse, could read the weather well enough to know when to bring the animals in. Her hands grew calloused, her shoulders grew stronger, and slowly, carefully, something else grew too. Not quite friendship, not quite partnership, but something. Colt talked more. Not a lot, but more. He told her about his ranch, about the horses he was trying to breed, about his plans to expand the pastures. She listened, asked questions, offered ideas. Sometimes he even smiled. It was a small thing, his smile, brief and rare, but it lit up his whole face when it happened. Mara started to notice other things too. The way he always made sure she had enough to eat, the way he checked the fence around the house every night before bed, the way he didn't flinch when she got close to him while they worked. He treated her like she was capable, like she was worth teaching. No one had ever done that before. One evening, about 5 weeks after the choosing, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun go down when Colt said, "You miss town?" Mara considered the question. "No." "Your mother?" "No." Any of it? She thought about Sarah, who hadn't tried to visit, about the women who had laughed at her, about the life she'd left behind. No, she said again. I don't miss any of it. Colt nodded. Good. They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Mara said, What about you? Do you miss anything? From where? Wherever you came from before here. He was quiet for a long time. No, he said eventually. Nothing worth missing. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. We should head back into town soon, Colt said. Get more supplies, plus, he hesitated. People need to see you're all right. Stop the rumors. Mara's stomach twisted. Do we have to? Not if you don't want to. But you think we should. I think hiding out here forever isn't going to help. They're still talking, still making up stories. Eventually, you're going to have to face them. What if I don't want to? Then you don't. It's your choice. Mara looked at him. You keep saying that it's my choice. But is it? We're married by law. I live here, I work here. How much choice do I actually have? Colt met her gaze steadily. You can leave any time you want. Pack your things, take one of the horses, ride wherever you want to go. I won't stop you. You mean that? Yes. Then why haven't you said it before? Because I didn't want you to think I wanted you gone. The words hung in the air between them. Mara's throat was tight. Do you? Want me gone? No, Colt said simply. But that doesn't mean you have to stay. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Mara said, I don't want to go. Something shifted in Colt's expression. Relief, maybe, or something close to it. Okay, he said. Then you stay. The next week they rode back into town. This time, Mara was ready, or at least she told herself she was. They went to the general store first. Mr. Peterson greeted them with the same careful politeness as before. A few people stared, but no one said anything, until they walked out. Sheriff Garrett was waiting on the street, arms crossed. Mr. Maddox, he said. Mrs. Maddox, Colt nodded curtly. Been meaning to talk to you, the sheriff continued. There's a town gathering this Saturday. Dance, music, food. Everyone's expected to attend. We'll pass. I'm afraid that's not an option. It's mandatory for all married couples. That's a new rule. It's a necessary rule. We need to maintain community bonds. The sheriff's eyes flicked to Mara. Besides, I'm sure Mrs. Maddox would enjoy getting out, meeting people properly. Mara's stomach dropped. She's met people, Colt said flatly. Not in a social setting. It's important, so we'll see you both on Saturday. 7 o'clock, Town Square. The sheriff tipped his hat. Have a good day. He walked away before either of them could respond. Colt's jaw was tight. We're not going. He said it was mandatory. I don't care what he said. What if he comes out to the ranch again? What if he... Let him. I'm not dragging you to some dance so everyone can gawk at you. Mara took a breath. What if I want to go? Colt looked at her sharply. What? What if I want to go? You don't. How do you know? Because I know what they'll do. They'll whisper. They'll stare. They'll make you feel like I always feel? Mara met his eyes. I know what they think of me, Colt. I've known my whole life, and maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong at a dance. Maybe I can't dance or dress right or do any of the things I'm supposed to do. Her voice shook slightly. But I'm tired of hiding, and if we don't go, they win. They get to keep me as this joke, this thing they can laugh at. You're not a joke. Then let's prove it. Colt stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, he said. We'll go. Really? Really? But Mara? His expression was serious. If it gets bad, if they say something, do something, we leave. I don't care if the sheriff shows up with an army. We leave, understand? She nodded. And one more thing. He stepped closer. You're not a joke. You're not a burden. You're not any of the things they say you are. You're strong, and you work hard, and you're learning faster than anyone I've ever taught. So if we're going to do this, if we're going to walk into that square and face all those people, you walk in knowing that, all right? Mara's eyes stung. She blinked rapidly. All right. Colt held her gaze for another moment. Then he turned and started loading the supplies onto the horses. Mara stood there, her heart pounding, wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. But underneath the fear, there was something else. Something that felt almost like hope. Saturday came too fast. Mara spent the morning trying not to think about the dance. She worked in the barn, mucking out stalls with more force than necessary. Every time her mind drifted to the town square, to the music, the people, the inevitable stares, her stomach knotted. Colt found her around noon leaning against a fence post and staring at nothing. "You're still set on this?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then we need to get you something to wear." Mara looked down at her worn brown dress. "What's wrong with this?" "Nothing, but if we're doing this, we're doing it right." He hesitated. "There's a trunk in the back of my room. Belonged to my sister. She left most of her things when she took off. You're about her size. Maybe there's something in there." "Colt, I can't." "She'd want someone to use them. Come on." The trunk was old cedar, scarred and heavy. Colt dragged it out into the main room and flipped open the lid. Inside were dresses, more dresses than Mara had ever owned in her life. Some were simple, some were fancy. All of them were carefully folded, preserved like memories. "Take whatever you want," Colt said. Then he left her alone with it. Mara knelt beside the trunk, running her fingers over the fabric. There was a green one that looked soft, a blue one with buttons down the front. At the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a dress the color of deep wine. She lifted it out carefully. It was beautiful. Simple cut, long sleeves, but the fabric had a sheen to it that caught the light. It was the kind of dress someone wore when they wanted to be noticed. Mara held it up to herself and caught her reflection in the window. For just a moment, she looked like someone else, someone who belonged at a dance. She folded it carefully and took it to her room. That evening, as the sun started to dip, she put it on. The fabric slid over her skin like water. It fit. Not perfectly, but close enough. She looked at herself in the small mirror Colt had hung on the wall weeks ago. She looked different. Not beautiful, maybe, but not invisible either. When she came out of her room, Colt was waiting by the door. He'd changed too. Clean shirt, dark pants, his hair combed back. He looked almost uncomfortable in clothes that weren't work-stained. He saw her and stopped moving entirely. "What?" Mara asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Is it wrong? I can change." "No." His voice was rough. "It's good. You look good." Heat crept up her neck. "Thank you." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Colt cleared his throat. "We should go, before I change my mind." The ride into town was silent, except for the sound of hooves on packed dirt. The closer they got, the tighter Mara's chest became. By the time they reached the edge of Red Hollow, she could barely breathe. The town square had been transformed. Lanterns hung from every post, casting warm light over everything. Tables were set up along the edges, covered with food and drink. In the center, a small band played, fiddle, guitar, someone on a makeshift drum. People were already dancing, laughing, talking. It looked almost festive. Colt helped her down from her horse and tied both animals to a post. "Stay close," he murmured. They walked into the square together. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The music kept playing, but everything else seemed to pause. Sheriff Garrett appeared almost instantly, his face split in a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Maddox, Mrs. Maddox, so glad you could make it." "We're here," Colt said flatly. "And don't you both look fine? Mrs. Maddox, that's a lovely dress." "Thank you," Mara managed. "Well, don't just stand there. Get some food. Mingle. Dance." The sheriff gestured expansively. "That's what we're here for, after all. Community." He walked away, already greeting someone else. Mara felt every eye in the square on her. She wanted to run, wanted to grab Colt's arm and leave right now, consequences be damned. But she didn't. Instead, she took a breath and walked toward the food tables. Colt stayed beside her, a solid presence. Mrs. Chen, who ran the bakery, was serving pie. She saw Mara and her expression flickered, surprised, and then something that might have been approval. "Mara, haven't seen you in weeks." "Been busy," Mara said. "I can see that. You look well." It was such a simple statement, but it caught Mara off guard. "Thank you." Mrs. Chen cut her a slice of pie without being asked. "Apple. Fresh today." Mara took it, mumbled another thank you, and moved on. They found a spot near the edge of the square, away from the center of activity. Mara picked at her pie while Colt stood with his arms crossed, watching the crowd like he was waiting for a fight. "You don't have to look so threatening," Mara said quietly. "I'm not." "You are. You look like you're about to punch someone." "Maybe I am." "Colt, they're staring at you." "I know. It's rude." "I know that too, but if you start a fight, it'll just make everything worse." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't like this." "Neither do I. But we're here. We might as well make it count." Sarah appeared then, threading through the crowd. She looked different than Mara remembered, thinner, tired. When she reached them, she gave a tentative smile. "Mara? Hi." "Sarah?" An awkward pause. Then Sarah said, "I'm sorry I haven't come to see you. I wanted to, but Tom, my husband, he said it wasn't appropriate." "It's fine." "It's not. I should have come anyway." Sarah glanced at Colt, then back at Mara. "Are you all right? Really?" "I'm fine." "Because if you're not, if he's been nothing but kind," Mara said firmly. "Better than kind." Sarah looked relieved. "Good. That's good." She hesitated. "You look really nice tonight." "So do you." They stood there, two old friends who didn't know how to be friends anymore. Finally, Sarah said, "I should get back. Tom's waiting, but maybe I could visit sometime, if that's all right." "I'd like that." Sarah smiled, squeezed Mara's hand briefly, and disappeared back into the crowd. "She seems scared," Colt observed. "She married Tom Bradshaw. She should be." Colt's expression darkened, but he didn't say anything. The music shifted. A slower song, something meant for couples. People paired off and moved to the center of the square. Mara watched them, feeling that familiar ache of being on the outside. "Do you know how to dance?" Colt asked suddenly. She looked at him. "What?" "Dancing. Do you know how?" "No, never learned." He nodded, like he'd expected that. Then, to her complete shock, he held out his hand. "Want to?" "Dance?" "That's generally what people do at a dance." "Colt, I can't, neither can I, so we'll figure it out together. People will laugh. Let them." Mara stared at his outstretched hand. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to stay safe on the edges where she belonged. But she'd spent her whole life on the edges. She took his hand. His palm was rough and warm. He led her toward the center of the square, and Mara felt the weight of every stare intensify. Someone snickered. Someone else whispered something she couldn't quite hear. Colt stopped in a relatively open space and turned to face her. "Okay, I think your hand goes here?" He placed her hand on his shoulder. "And I put my hand here?" His hand settled on her waist, light and careful. "And we just move?" "I have no idea," Mara admitted. "Then we'll make it up." They started to sway. It wasn't graceful. They stepped on each other's feet twice in the first 30 seconds. Mara couldn't find the rhythm of the music, and Colt moved like someone trying to avoid a trap. But they didn't stop. Around them, other couples danced with practiced ease. Some watched with open amusement. Others pretended not to look. "This is terrible," Mara said, almost laughing despite herself. "Worst dancing I've ever done." "You've done worse dancing?" "Once. Got drunk at a harvest festival. Tried to dance with a fence post." "Did the fence post lead?" "It did. Still danced better than me." Mara did laugh then, a real laugh that surprised her. Colt's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. They kept moving, finding a rhythm that had nothing to do with the music and everything to do with just not falling over. Mara stopped worrying about looking foolish. She stopped caring what anyone thought. For just a few minutes, it was only her and Colt, stumbling their way through something neither of them knew how to do. The song ended. They stopped moving, still standing close. Someone started clapping. Mara looked around, startled. Mrs. Chen was clapping. Then a few other people joined in, not mocking, not cruel, just applause. It wasn't everyone. Most people still looked skeptical or amused, but it was more than Mara had expected. Colt led her back to the edge of the square. They stood there, both slightly breathless. That wasn't so bad, Mara said. Wasn't so good either. But we did it. We did. The evening wore on. Mara found herself relaxing bit by bit. People still stared, but the edge of malice had dulled. A few women even nodded to her as they passed. It wasn't friendship, but it wasn't open hostility either. Progress, maybe. Around 9 o'clock, Sheriff Garrett called for everyone's attention. The music stopped. People gathered around the platform where he stood. "Thank you all for coming tonight," the sheriff said, his voice carrying across the square. "It's nights like these that remind us why Red Hollow is such a strong community. We take care of our own. We stand together." Mara felt Colt tense beside her. "Now, as you all know, we've had some interesting additions to our community recently." The sheriff's eyes found Mara and Colt in the crowd. "New marriages, new arrangements, and I think it's important we welcome these new couples properly. So I'd like to invite Mr. and Mrs. Maddox up here to say a few words." The crowd parted, creating a path to the platform. Mara's blood went cold. "No." "Ignore him," Colt muttered. "Mr. Maddox?" The sheriff's smile was sharp. "Don't be shy." "We're not interested," Colt called back. "It's tradition. Every new couple speaks. Come on now, just a few words about married life, how you're settling in." Mara could feel the crowd's anticipation. They wanted the show. Wanted to see her stumble and stammer and prove she didn't belong. Before she could think better of it, she started walking toward the platform. "Mara," Colt hissed. She didn't stop. The crowd murmured as she climbed the steps. Sheriff Garrett looked surprised and pleased. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to speak. Mara looked out at all those faces. Some curious, some amused, some openly hostile. She saw her mother standing near the back, expression unreadable. Her throat was dry. Her hands were shaking. But she spoke anyway. "I don't have much to say," she started. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. She tried again, louder. "I'm not good at speeches, never have been. But since the sheriff asked..." She paused. "Married life is strange. I won't lie about that. Living with someone you barely know, learning how they take their coffee, how they work, what makes them angry." She found Colt in the crowd. He was watching her intently. "But I've learned something these past few weeks. I've learned that kindness isn't about big gestures or pretty words. It's about showing up, about teaching someone to mend a fence even when they're slow at it, about making sure they have enough to eat, about standing beside them when everyone else won't." The square was completely silent now. "I've spent my whole life being told I'm not enough, not pretty enough, not small enough, not quiet enough, or loud enough, or whatever enough people decided I should be." Her voice steadied. "But out at that ranch, I'm enough exactly as I am, and that's more than I ever had here." She looked at Sheriff Garrett. "So, thank you for asking me to speak, but I don't have anything else to say." She walked down the steps. The crowd was still silent as she made her way back to Colt. He was looking at her like he'd never seen her before. "Let's go," she said quietly. They walked out of the square together. Behind them, noise slowly returned. Conversations, music, life. But Mara didn't look back. They were halfway to their horses when someone called out, "Wait!" Mara turned. Sarah was running after them, her skirts bunched in her hands. "Wait," she said again, breathless. That was brave. What you said, that was really brave." "It was stupid," Mara said. "No, it wasn't." Sarah glanced back toward the square, then at Mara. "Can I really visit? You meant that?" "I meant it." "Even though I didn't stand up for you when they were laughing?" Mara thought about that. About all the times Sarah had looked away, had stayed silent, had chosen safety over friendship. It would be easy to hold on to that anger, to let it fester, but she was tired of being angry. "You can visit," she said. "If you really want to." Sarah smiled, relieved. I do. I will. She hesitated. Be careful going home. The road can be dangerous at night. We'll be fine. Sarah nodded and hurried back to the square. Colt untied the horses. You ready? More than ready. They mounted up and rode out of town. The night was clear, the moon bright enough to light their way. Neither of them spoke until Red Hollow was far behind them. You surprised me tonight, Colt said finally. How? That speech. I didn't think you'd do it. Neither did I. But you did. I was tired of being quiet. Mara looked at him. You said I didn't have to hide anymore. So I didn't. Colt nodded slowly. Good. They rode in silence for a while. Then Mara said, Thank you. For what? For dancing with me, even though we were terrible. We were pretty bad. The worst. Fence post would have done better. Mara laughed. The sound felt strange in the quiet night, but good, really good. When they reached the ranch, Colt took care of the horses while Mara went inside. She changed out of the wine-colored dress, hanging it carefully in her wardrobe. Tomorrow she'd be back in her work clothes, mending fences and feeding horses. But tonight, for just a little while, she'd been someone different, someone brave. She was in the kitchen making tea when Colt came in. He'd changed too, back into his usual shirt and pants. You want some? She asked, gesturing to the tea. Sure. They sat at the table, the silence comfortable now. After a while, Colt said, My sister would have liked you. Mara looked up. Yeah? Yeah. She was quiet like you, but when she finally spoke up, people listened. He stared into his cup. I wish I'd been there to see her do it more often, before she left. Is she? Mara wasn't sure how to ask. Alive? Far as I know. Last I heard she was in California, working in a boarding house. Seems happy. He paused. Or as happy as she can be, anyway. You don't talk to her? She doesn't want to talk to me. Can't say I blame her. Mara wanted to say something comforting, but the words wouldn't come. So instead, she just reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. He looked at her surprised, but he didn't pull away. They finished their tea in silence. Then Colt stood. I'm going to turn in. Big day tomorrow. Need to check the north fence. I'll help. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. He nodded. All right then. Good night, Mara. Good night. She listened to his door close, then sat alone in the kitchen for a while longer, thinking about everything that had happened. The dance, the speech, the way Colt had looked at her when she'd taken his hand. Something had shifted tonight. Something fundamental. She wasn't the same person who'd stood in that square 6 weeks ago, waiting to be chosen. And Colt wasn't just the man who'd chosen her. They were becoming something else, something neither of them had quite figured out yet. But for the first time in her life, Mara wasn't afraid of the unknown. She went to bed and slept better than she had in months. The next few weeks passed quietly. The dance became something people talked about in town, some with approval, some with continued skepticism. But the outright cruelty had lessened. People nodded when they saw Mara. Some even smiled. Sarah visited twice, bringing bread from the bakery and staying for tea. The conversations were stilted at first, but they got easier. She told Mara about her marriage, about Tom's temper, about the loneliness of living with someone who barely looked at her. Mara listened, offered what comfort she could. You're lucky, Sarah said during the second visit. Colt treats you like a person. Most of the men here, they don't even do that. What about your husband? Sarah looked away. Tom's not a bad man. He's just Tom. Mara didn't press. She knew better than anyone how complicated these things were. Work on the ranch continued. Mara was getting stronger, more confident. She could repair a saddle now, could read a horse's mood, could handle most of the daily tasks without needing Colt's help. He noticed, of course he noticed. He didn't say much about it, but she'd catch him watching her sometimes with something that looked like pride. One morning, about 3 weeks after the dance, Mara was in the barn when she heard voices outside. Male voices, multiple of them. She stepped out to find 4 men standing in the yard, Sheriff Garrett and 3 deputies she didn't recognize. Colt was already there, his stance defensive. "What do you want?" "Just checking in," the sheriff said pleasantly. "Making sure everything's running smoothly out here." "It is." "Good, good. Mind if we look around?" "Yes, I do mind." The sheriff's smile thinned. "Now, Mr. Maddox, there's no need to be hostile. We're just doing our job." "Your job is to come out here and harass me?" "Our job is to make sure all citizens of Red Hollow are following the law." "I'm following the law." "Are you?" The sheriff's eyes flicked to Mara. "Mrs. Maddox, you all right?" "Fine," she said. "You sure? You look a little tired, a little worn down." "That's what work does." "Work. Right." The sheriff walked a slow circle around the yard. "You know, I've been hearing some interesting things. People saying they've seen Mrs. Maddox out here doing heavy labor. Fences, horses, all kinds of things that maybe aren't appropriate for a woman." "She works because she wants to work," Colt said. "Does she? Or does she work because you make her?" "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" The sheriff stopped walking. "See, from where I'm standing, it looks like you brought this woman out here and turned her into unpaid help. That's not a marriage, Mr. Maddox. That's exploitation." Mara's hands clenched into fists. "He's not exploiting me." "Then what would you call it?" "Teaching. He's teaching me, and I'm learning. There's a difference." "Maybe. Or maybe you're just too scared to tell the truth." Colt took a step forward. "Get off my land." The sheriff held up his hands. "Easy now. I'm just asking questions." "You've asked. Now leave." "We'll leave when we're satisfied that everything's in order." The sheriff nodded to his deputies. "Check the barn, the house. Make sure there's nothing concerning." "You have no right." "I have every right. I'm the sheriff." The deputies moved toward the barn. Colt moved to block them, but Sheriff Garrett put a hand on his chest. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Interfering with an officer of the law is a serious offense." Mara watched, helpless, as the deputies searched the barn. They poked through the tack room, examined the stalls, looked at everything like they were searching for evidence of a crime. One of them came out holding her work gloves. "Look at these, worn through in places. How hard is he making her work?" "Those are mine," Colt said flatly. "She has her own. The deputy tossed them aside and went back in. Mara felt humiliation crawl up her spine. They were treating her like a victim, like something broken that needed saving. It was almost worse than being laughed at. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the deputies came back empty-handed. "Nothing," one of them reported. Sheriff Garrett looked disappointed. "Nothing at all? Place is clean. No signs of anything." "Well," the sheriff turned back to Colt and Mara. "Looks like you're in the clear, for now. But I'll be keeping an eye on things. And Mrs. Maddox?" He looked at her directly. "If you ever need help, you come find me. Understand?" Mara didn't answer. The sheriff and his men mounted up and rode away. The moment they were out of sight, Mara's knees went weak. She sat down hard on the porch steps. Colt stood in the yard, his fists clenched, breathing hard. "That was," Mara started. "A message," Colt finished. "He's not done with us." "Why does he care so much?" "Because I didn't follow his rules. I chose wrong, according to him, and he doesn't like being shown up." Colt finally looked at her. "I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. It's not your fault. Isn't it? I chose you. I brought you here, and now we're dealing with it. Together." Mara stood up, her legs steadier now. "I'm not leaving, and I'm not going to let him make me feel like a victim. I've been a victim my whole life. I'm done with it." Colt studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "All right. Then we fight back." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." They went back to work, but the shadow of the sheriff's visit hung over everything for the rest of the day. That night, neither of them could sleep. Mara heard Colt moving around in his room, restless. Finally, around midnight, she got up and went to the kitchen for water. Colt was already there, sitting at the table in the dark. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "No." She sat down across from him. "What are you thinking?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm thinking that maybe you should go." Mara's stomach dropped. "What?" "Not permanently, just back to town. Find somewhere else to stay. If you're not here, he can't use you against me. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Mara, no, listen to me. If I leave, what do you think happens? Everyone in town will say you drove me away, that you were as bad as they thought, and the sheriff will use that as an excuse to run you out of Red Hollow entirely. She leaned forward. We stick together. That's the only way this works. It's dangerous. So is living. I'd rather be in danger with you than safe and alone in some boarding house in town, waiting for the next man to claim me. Her voice was fierce. You chose me. So let me choose you back. Let me stay and fight. And Colt looked at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. You really want to? Yes. Even though it's going to get worse before it gets better? Even though. He nodded slowly. Okay. Then we do this together. They sat in the dark kitchen, two people who'd started as strangers and become something else, something neither of them had words for yet. But words didn't matter, they had each other. And that would have to be enough. The next morning came too early. Mara woke to the sound of hammering, steady, rhythmic, angry. She threw on her clothes and went outside to find Colt reinforcing the fence around the house, driving nails in with more force than necessary. What are you doing? She asked. Making sure no one can walk onto this property without us knowing. He didn't look up from his work. Should have done it weeks ago. Colt, a fence isn't going to stop the sheriff. Maybe not, but it'll slow him down. Mara watched him work for a moment, then went to grab her own hammer. Where do you want me? He finally looked at her. You don't have to. I know. Where do you want me? He pointed to the south side. Start there. Same pattern. Every 6 feet. They worked in silence for the next 3 hours, the sun climbing higher and hotter with each passing minute. Mara's shoulders burned and her hands ached, but she didn't stop. Neither did Colt. Around noon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Mara's stomach tightened until she recognized the horse, Sarah's mare. Sarah rode into the yard looking worried. I heard what happened yesterday. About the sheriff. News travels fast, Colt said flatly. It always does in Red Hollow. Sarah dismounted and tied her horse. Tom told me about it last night. He was at the tavern when the deputies came back. They were laughing about it. Of course they were, Mara muttered. But that's not why I'm here. Sarah pulled a folded paper from her pocket. This was posted in town this morning, on the board outside the sheriff's office. Mara took the paper and unfolded it. Her blood ran cold. It was a notice. An official-looking document with the sheriff's seal at the bottom. The words seemed to blur together, but certain phrases jumped out. Welfare check. Concerns about Mrs. Mara Maddox. Mandatory evaluation by town council. Failure to comply will result in legal action. They're calling a hearing, Sarah said quietly. Next week. They want you both to appear before the council and prove that your marriage is legitimate. Prove it how? Colt had come over to read the notice himself. His jaw was tight. I don't know. But Tom said the sheriff's been talking to people, asking questions about you two, about whether anyone's seen you acting like a real married couple. Mara felt sick. What does that even mean? I think he's trying to claim the marriage is a sham, that you're living together but not actually, you know. Sarah looked uncomfortable. Married? The implication hung in the air. Colt crumpled the paper in his fist. This is insane. It's the sheriff, Sarah said. He doesn't like being challenged, and you challenged him in front of the whole town when you chose Mara. So now he's going to what? Annul the marriage? Force Mara back into another choosing? I don't know, but you need to take this seriously. Sarah looked at Mara. Both of you. If the council rules against you, they can do whatever they want. The sheriff has them all in his pocket. After Sarah left, Mara and Colt sat on the porch and read through the notice again. And again, looking for loopholes, for ways out. There weren't any. We could run, Colt said finally. Pack up tonight. Head west. There are territories out there where nobody cares about Red Hollow's rules. And leave everything you've built here? I've left things before. But you don't want to. I can see it. Mara set the paper down. You like this ranch. You've put work into it. You have plans. Plans don't matter if they matter, and I'm not going to be the reason you lose everything. She stood up. We go to the hearing. We tell them the truth, that we're married and it's nobody's business but ours. They won't accept that. Then we make them accept it. Colt looked at her like she'd lost her mind. How? I don't know yet, but we've got a week to figure it out. The week passed in a blur of tension and preparation. Colt made inquiries in town, trying to find out exactly what the council would ask, what they would accept as proof, but nobody would talk to him. The few people who were friendly had suddenly become very busy or very forgetful. Mara spent her time working even harder than usual, as if physical exhaustion could keep the fear at bay. She fixed the entire north fence by herself, replaced 3 broken boards in the barn, and organized the tack room until everything had a place. Colt watched her with increasing concern. You're going to work yourself to death. Better than sitting around worrying. Mara, I'm fine. She wasn't fine. None of this was fine. But what else could she do? 2 days before the hearing, Mrs. Chen showed up at the ranch with a basket of bread. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to follow her. I can't stay long, she said, but I wanted to bring you this, and to tell you something. What? Mara asked. The sheriff's been asking people to testify against you, saying he needs witnesses to prove the marriage isn't real. Colt's expression darkened. Who's he asked? A lot of people. Most are too scared to say no, but Mrs. Chen hesitated. Some of us remember what it was like when the sheriff first came to Red Hollow, how he changed the rules to benefit himself and his friends. Some of us are tired of it. What are you saying? Mara asked. I'm saying you're not alone. There are people who'll speak for you if you need them. Not many, maybe, but some. She pressed the basket into Mara's hands. Be brave at that hearing. Don't let them make you small. She left before either of them could respond. That night, Mara couldn't sleep again. She kept thinking about the hearing, about standing in front of the council and trying to prove something that shouldn't need proving. Around midnight, she gave up and went to sit on the porch. Colt was already there, staring out at the dark fields. Can't sleep? She asked. No. She sat down beside him. Me neither. They were quiet for a while. Then Colt said, I keep thinking about what the sheriff said, about proving the marriage is real. Yeah. The thing is, he paused. It is real. Maybe not in the way they mean, but it's real. Mara looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, we live together. We work together. We eat together. We talk. Sometimes we even laugh. He turned to face her. That's more than most married couples in Red Hollow have, but it's not going to be enough for them. What will be enough? He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. They'll want proof of intimacy, physical proof. Mara's face heated. Oh. I'm not suggesting I would never... Colt ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I'm just saying that's what they're looking for. Evidence that this is a traditional marriage, which it isn't. No. So we're going to lose. Not necessarily. Colt leaned forward, elbows on his knees. We could lie. Lie? Tell them what they want to hear. Say we share a bed. Say all the things that married people are supposed to do. Who's going to disprove it? The sheriff would try. Let him try. He can't prove something that happens behind closed doors. Colt looked at her. But only if you're comfortable with it. Only if you're willing to lie. Mara thought about it. About standing in front of those men and claiming an intimacy that didn't exist. About letting them believe something that wasn't true just to satisfy their need for control. It felt wrong, but losing felt worse. I'll do it, she said. I'll lie. You're sure? I'm sure. But Colt? She met his eyes. We need to get our story straight. If we're going to lie, we need to lie well. They spent the next hour talking through details. How long they'd supposedly been sharing a room, what their routine was. Small domestic details that would make the lie believable. It felt strange and uncomfortable, but by the end they had a story that sounded plausible. As Mara was about to head back inside, Colt caught her arm gently. Thank you, he said. For what? For being willing to do this, for not running. Where would I run to? She smiled faintly. This is my home now, too. Something shifted in his expression, something warm and complicated that Mara didn't quite know how to read. Then he let go of her arm and nodded. Get some sleep. We've got a long day ahead tomorrow. The morning of the hearing arrived cold and gray. Mara dressed in the wine-colored dress again. It seemed appropriate somehow, wearing something that made her feel stronger than she was. Colt wore his cleanest clothes and actually shaved, which made him look younger and somehow more vulnerable. They rode into town side by side, neither speaking. The council building was in the center of Red Hollow, a squat stone structure that served as courthouse, meeting hall, and occasionally jail. People were already gathering outside, curious about the spectacle. Sheriff Garrett stood at the entrance, arms crossed, looking satisfied. Mr. and Mrs. Maddox, right on time. Let's get this over with, Colt said. Inside, the council chamber was set up like a courtroom. 5 men sat behind a long table at the front, the council members, all of them older, all of them wealthy landowners. Mara recognized a few faces but didn't know any of them personally. Sheriff Garrett took his place at a smaller table to the side. Colt and Mara were directed to stand in the center of the room, facing the council. The head councilman, a man named Horace Pruitt, banged his gavel. This hearing is now in session. We are here to evaluate the marriage of Colt Maddox and Mara Bell Maddox, following concerns raised by Sheriff Garrett about the legitimacy of said marriage. Concerns? Colt said. What concerns? Order! Pruitt banged the gavel again. You'll have your chance to speak. Sheriff, present your case. Garrett stood. Thank you, Councilman. Gentlemen, I come before you today because I believe this marriage is a fraud. Mr. Maddox chose Mrs. Maddox not out of genuine interest or intent to build a proper family, but as an act of defiance. Since then, he has kept her isolated on his ranch, forcing her to perform manual labor unsuitable for a woman, and has failed to demonstrate any of the normal behaviors of a married couple. That's not true, Mara started, but Pruitt cut her off. You'll have your turn, Mrs. Maddox. Continue, Sheriff. I have witnesses who will testify that Mr. Maddox and Mrs. Maddox do not act like husband and wife, that they barely speak in public, that they sleep in separate rooms, that there is no affection between them whatsoever. Separate rooms? Another councilman leaned forward. Is this true? Mara and Colt exchanged a glance. This was it, the moment they'd prepared for. No, Colt said firmly. We share a room. Have since the first week. It was a lie, but it sounded true. Then why would witnesses claim otherwise? Garrett demanded. Because no witnesses have been in our house, Mara said. Because what happens in our home is private, and because people in this town will believe whatever fits their narrative. Murmurs rippled through the room. Pruitt banged his gavel. Order. Sheriff, do you have any actual evidence or just speculation? Garrett's jaw tightened. I have multiple testimonies from people who have never set foot on the Maddox property. Well, no, but then what you have is gossip. Pruitt looked at Colt and Mara. Do you consider yourselves married? Yes, they said in unison. Do you intend to remain married? Yes. And do you conduct yourselves as married people ought to? Mara's face heated, but she kept her voice steady. Yes, in every way. Pruitt studied them for a long moment, then he leaned back. Sheriff, unless you have concrete evidence of fraud, and I mean concrete, not rumors and assumptions, I'm inclined to dismiss this hearing. But, however, Pruitt held up a hand. Given the unusual circumstances of this marriage, I think it's appropriate to impose a probationary period. 6 months, during which time the Maddoxes will check in with this council monthly to confirm the marriage remains intact and legitimate. After 6 months, if there are no further concerns, the matter will be considered closed. Agreed? It wasn't a question. Colt's hands were fists at his sides, but he nodded. Agreed. Mrs. Maddox? Agreed, Mara said. Then this hearing is adjourned. Pruitt banged the gavel one last time. The room erupted into conversation. Sheriff Garrett looked furious, but there was nothing he could do. The council had spoken. Colt took Mara's arm and led her outside before anyone could stop them. They made it to their horses and were mounting up when they heard footsteps behind them. Wait. It was Mara's mother. Mara froze, one foot in the stirrup. What do you want? Her mother looked older than ever, her face lined with something that might have been regret. I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're all right. Are you? Yes, I know you don't believe me, but I am. She glanced at Colt. He's been good to you? Better than anyone else ever was. Her mother flinched. I know I wasn't the mother you deserved. I know that. But I did what I thought was best. For yourself, not for me. Maybe. I don't know anymore. She took a step closer. But seeing you in there, standing up for yourself, speaking clearly, I was proud of you. Mara didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if she wanted to forgive or stay angry or just feel nothing at all. Finally, she said, "Thank you for telling me. But I need to go." Her mother nodded. "Take care of yourself, Mara." "I will." They rode away, leaving her mother standing alone in the street. The ride back to the ranch was quiet until they were about halfway home. Then Colt said, "That was harder than I thought it would be." Lying? All of it, standing there while they judged us, while they acted like they had the right to know everything about our lives. They think they do have the right, because they're men and we're... Mara trailed off. Beneath them? Something like that. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Mara said, "What do we do now? They want us to check in monthly for 6 months. That's 6 more chances for the sheriff to find something wrong." "Then we don't give him anything to find." Colt looked at her. "We keep doing what we've been doing. We work. We live. We prove them wrong just by existing. And if that's not enough, then we fight harder." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. When they got back to the ranch, they went through their usual routines, taking care of the horses, checking the property, making dinner. Everything was normal on the surface, but underneath, they were both rattled. After dinner, Mara started washing dishes. Colt dried. They'd fallen into this rhythm weeks ago without discussing it. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said. "Sure." "Why didn't you just tell the truth today? About the separate rooms? We could have explained it, said we were taking things slow or whatever." Colt was quiet for a moment. "Because the truth wouldn't have mattered. They didn't want the truth. They wanted proof that we're following their rules, living how they think we should live. And if I'd admitted we sleep separately, they would have used it as evidence that the marriage is fake." And he set down the plate he'd been drying. Sometimes the truth is a luxury we can't afford. Mara understood that. She'd spent her whole life hiding truths about herself, how she felt, what she wanted, who she was, because the truth would have made her even more of a target. "I hate lying," she said. "So do I. But we're going to keep doing it. For now, until we don't have to anymore." Mara didn't ask when that would be. She wasn't sure either of them knew. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the hearing, about her mother's face, about the way Colt had stood beside her without hesitation, lying to protect them both, about how complicated everything had become. She must have finally fallen asleep because she woke to the sound of breaking glass. Mara shot upright, her heart pounding. She heard movement in the main room, heard Colt's door slam open. "Stay in your room," he shouted. Like hell. She grabbed the fireplace poker from beside her bed. Colt had insisted she keep something for protection after the sheriff's visit, and crept to her door. The main room was dark except for moonlight coming through the windows. One of those windows was broken, glass scattered across the floor. And standing in the middle of the room was a figure in dark clothes. Colt had the person pinned against the wall before Mara could fully process what was happening. "Who are you?" Colt demanded. "What do you want?" The figure struggled. "Let me go!" It was a young voice, scared. Colt pulled off the person's hood, revealing a boy who couldn't have been more than 15. His eyes were wide with terror. "Tommy Chen?" Mara recognized him, Mrs. Chen's youngest son. "What are you doing here?" "I'm sorry," the boy gasped. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to. They made me—" "Who made you?" Colt's grip didn't loosen. "The deputies. They said if I didn't do it, they'd arrest my ma for theft. Said she's been overcharging customers. It's not true. But they said they'd make it stick." "Do what?" Mara asked. "What did they tell you to do?" Tommy pulled something from his pocket with his free hand, a small cloth bag. It smelled sharp and chemical. "They told me to put this in your well, said it would make you sick, said if you couldn't work, the council would have proof the marriage was fake." Mara felt cold all over. They were going to poison us? Not poison, just make you sick enough that you'd have to go back to town, back to the doctor, and then everyone would see. He trailed off, looking miserable. Colt finally released him. Where are the deputies now? Waiting, down the road. They said to signal when it was done. Tommy looked at them both, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Mara looked at Colt. His expression was dark and dangerous. Take the bag, he told Tommy. Go back to the deputies. Tell them it's done. What? But do it, and then go home to your mother and tell her everything. Tell her to close the bakery tomorrow and stay inside, understand? Tommy nodded, grabbed the bag, and ran out through the broken window. Mara turned to Colt. What are you doing? Ending this. How? By giving them exactly what they think they want. He grabbed his coat. Get dressed. We're going into town. Now? It's the middle of the night. Exactly. Get dressed. Mara didn't argue. She threw on clothes as fast as she could and met Colt in the main room. He'd already saddled both horses. They rode hard toward town, the night air cold and sharp. Mara had no idea what Colt was planning, but the set of his jaw told her it wasn't going to be pretty. When they reached Red Hollow, the streets were empty except for the tavern, which still had lights burning. Colt dismounted outside the sheriff's office and tried the door. Locked. He kicked it open. Colt! Mara hissed. He ignored her and went inside. Mara followed, her heart in her throat. The office was empty except for stacks of papers and a single lantern burning low. Colt started rifling through the papers, looking for something. What are you doing? Finding proof. He pulled open drawer after drawer. Garrett's not smart enough to hide everything. There has to be, here. He held up a ledger. Even from across the room, Mara could see it was full of entries written in a cramped hand. What is it? Records. Payments. Look. He pointed to one entry. Payment to Tom Bradshaw for testimony. Payment to James Morton for testimony. Payment to Henry Liu for... He flipped through more pages. He's been paying people to testify against us. Against other couples, too. Look at this. Mara came closer and read over his shoulder. Page after page of payments, bribes, records of manipulation. It was worse than they'd thought. The sheriff hadn't just targeted them. He'd been controlling marriages across Red Hollow for years, breaking up couples that didn't fit his vision, rewarding ones that did. This is enough, Colt said. This is proof that he's corrupt. Who are you going to show it to? The council? They're his friends. Not the council, everyone. Colt tucked the ledger inside his coat. We're going to make sure every person in Red Hollow sees exactly what kind of man their sheriff is. They were almost to the door when it opened. Sheriff Garrett stood there, flanked by two deputies. His expression was murderous. Breaking and entering, he said. That's a serious crime, Mr. Maddox. So is bribery and attempted poisoning. The sheriff's eyes flicked to the ledger-shaped bulge in Colt's coat. I don't know what you think you found, but I found everything. And I'm going to show everyone in this town exactly who you are. No, you're not. Garrett nodded to his deputies. Arrest them both. Charge them with theft, breaking and entering, and whatever else we can make stick. The deputies moved forward. Colt pushed Mara behind him. Run, he said quietly. I'm not leaving you. Mara, oh, no. The first deputy reached for Colt. Colt's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. The second deputy pulled his gun. Everything stopped. Don't, Garrett said, his voice cold. Put it away. The deputy hesitated, then lowered the gun. Garrett stepped forward. You think you're clever, don't you? You think you can expose me and everything will change, but it won't. I own this town. I own the council. I own every person who's too scared to stand against me. He smiled. You're nothing. And she's less than nothing. No ledger is going to change that. Maybe not, Colt said. But it's a start. He bolted for the door, yanking Mara with him. They made it to the horses and mounted up before the deputies could react. After them, Garrett shouted. Mara and Colt rode like hell was chasing them. Behind them, she could hear horses, shouts, the pounding of hooves on hard-packed dirt. They didn't head back to the ranch. Instead, Colt turned north toward the open territory beyond Red Hollow. Where are we going? Mara shouted over the wind. Away. We'll circle back later. But right now we need to lose them. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only one. When they finally stopped, they were miles from anywhere, surrounded by empty scrubland and darkness. Colt dismounted and checked behind them. No signs of pursuit. "I think we lost them," he said. Mara slid off her horse, her legs shaking. "Now what?" "Now we wait until morning. Then we take this ledger and we show it to everyone we can find. Mrs. Chen, Sarah, anyone who'll listen. And if no one listens, then we leave, for good this time." Mara sat down hard on the ground. Everything was falling apart. They'd fought so hard, and it still wasn't enough. Colt sat down beside her. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For all of it. For choosing you in the first place. For putting you in danger. For—" "Stop." Mara turned to face him. "I'm not sorry. Not for any of it. Yes, it's been hard. Yes, we're in trouble. But I'd rather be here with you in the middle of nowhere, running from corrupt lawmen, than back in that town living the life I had before." "Mara, I mean it. You gave me something I never had before. You gave me a choice. You gave me dignity. You gave me—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Colt looked at her in the moonlight, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her like that, deliberately, tenderly, not just to help her onto a horse or hand her a tool. "I need to tell you something," he said. "What?" "That day in the square when I chose you. It wasn't just because I felt sorry for you. And it wasn't just because of my sister." He paused. "It was because when I looked at you, standing there with your head up even though everyone was laughing, I saw someone who refused to break. And I thought maybe someone like that was someone I could learn from." Mara's throat was tight. "Learn what?" "How to be strong without being cruel. How to stand up when it would be easier to fall down. How to keep trying even when everything says you should give up." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "You've taught me that, Mara. Every day since then." "I haven't taught you anything. I've just been trying to survive." "That's exactly what I mean." They sat there in the darkness, holding hands like awkward teenagers, neither quite knowing what to say next. Finally, Mara said, "What happens now?" "Now we rest, and tomorrow we fight back one more time. And if that doesn't work," he looked at her, "then we leave, and we don't look back." "Together?" "Together." It wasn't a perfect plan. It wasn't even a good plan, but it was theirs. And that was enough. They dozed fitfully through what remained of the night, taking turns keeping watch. When dawn broke gray and cold across the scrubland, Mara woke with her back against a rock and Colt's coat draped over her shoulders. He was already awake, staring at the horizon. "See anything?" she asked, her voice rough from the cold. "Nothing. They either gave up or they're waiting for us back in town." He stood and offered her a hand up. "We should move." Mara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her body ached from sleeping on the ground, and her dress was filthy with dust and grass stains. She must have looked like hell, but Colt didn't comment on it. They mounted up and rode slowly back toward Red Hollow, keeping to the ridgeline where they could see the town below. From this distance, it looked peaceful, smoke rising from chimneys, people starting their morning routines, like nothing had happened last night. "What's the plan?" Mara asked. Colt patted the ledger tucked inside his coat. "We find Mrs. Chen first. She's got the most to lose if the sheriff goes after her, which means she's got the most reason to help us. Then we go to anyone else who might listen. And if they don't, then we tried." He looked at her. "You ready for this?" "No, but let's do it anyway." They circled around to enter town from the east, avoiding the main road. The bakery was on the edge of Red Hollow, a small building with a painted sign that was peeling at the edges. Smoke rose from the chimney. Mrs. Chen was already baking. Colt and Mara tied their horses around back and knocked on the rear door. It opened a crack. Mrs. Chen's face appeared, eyes wide. "What are you doing here? The sheriff has men looking for you. He's telling everyone you assaulted his deputies and stole from his office." "We did steal from his office," Colt said, "but it was worth it. Can we come in?" Mrs. Chen hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Quickly." Inside, the bakery smelled like bread and cinnamon. Tommy was sitting at a small table in the corner, his face pale. When he saw them, he jumped up. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. You did the right thing, Mara told him. Coming to warn us. That took courage. The deputies came by this morning, Mrs. Chen said, wringing her hands. Looking for Tommy, asking if I knew where you'd gone. I told them nothing, but they'll be back. Colt pulled out the ledger and set it on the counter. That's why we're here. Look at this. Mrs. Chen opened the ledger and began reading. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock to pure anger. He's been doing this for years? Looks like it, paying people to lie, breaking up marriages that don't fit his idea of how things should be, probably skimming money from town funds too, based on some of these entries. My husband, Mrs. Chen said softly, still reading. 3 years ago he wanted to leave me, said he wasn't happy. I thought it was my fault. She looked up, her eyes shining with tears. But it says here, the sheriff paid him to file for separation so he could marry me off to someone else. Someone who owed the sheriff money. Your husband's dead now, isn't he? Mara asked gently. Died last year. But before he died, he told me he was sorry, that he'd made a mistake. I thought he meant leaving me. She closed the ledger with shaking hands. He meant taking the money. The room was silent for a moment. Then Tommy said, What are you going to do with this? Show it to everyone we can, Colt said, starting with the people in this town who have the most reason to hate the sheriff, which seems to be a lot of people based on what's in there. You'll need more than just the ledger, Mrs. Chen said. You'll need witnesses, people willing to stand up and confirm what's written there. Will you? She looked at her son, then back at Colt and Mara. Yes, but you'll need others too. The more people who speak up, the harder it is for the sheriff to silence all of you. Who else? Mara asked. Mrs. Chen thought for a moment. Sarah Bradshaw. Her husband's name is in that ledger 6 times. Tom was one of the sheriff's most reliable witnesses. If she knew he was being paid, she trailed off. And there's old John Reeves at the stable. His daughter was supposed to marry a good man, but the sheriff intervened, sent her husband off on some made-up criminal charge. She ended up marrying a drunk who beats her. Where do we find him? Stable at the north end of town, but be careful. If the sheriff's men see you, we'll be careful, Colt said. They left through the back door and made their way through Red Hollow's alleys and back streets, avoiding the main roads. Mara kept expecting someone to spot them, to raise the alarm, but most people were too busy with their morning routines to notice 2 more figures in the shadows. The stable was old and weathered, but clean. They found John Reeves mucking out a stall, his movements slow with age. When he saw them, he straightened and squinted. You're the ones the sheriff's looking for. That's us, Colt said. Heard you broke into his office. Stole something important. We took this. Colt showed him the ledger. Want to see what's in it? John wiped his hands on his pants and took the ledger. He read slowly, his lips moving with the words. When he reached a particular page, he stopped. His hands began to shake. That bastard, he whispered. That goddamn bastard. Your daughter? Mara asked. Emma. She was supposed to marry David Fletcher. Good man. Hard-working. Loved her. John's voice cracked. But the sheriff said David had been caught stealing. Said there were witnesses. Said he'd be arrested unless he left town. So David left. And Emma. He closed the ledger and handed it back. Emma married Carl Hoffman because the sheriff said it was that or be branded as the fiancé of a criminal. Carl drinks. Hits her. She's got a black eye more often than not. Did you ever suspect the sheriff was lying? Colt asked. Suspected, yes. But what could I do? I'm an old man who works in a stable. Who'd listen to me? He looked at them both. But if you've got proof, if you've got that ledger and you're willing to show people, then I'll stand with you. I'll tell everyone what happened to Emma. It might not change anything, Mara warned. The council might still side with the sheriff. Maybe, but at least people will know. At least Emma will know her life got ruined because of greed and power, not because she wasn't good enough. John nodded firmly. I'm in. What do you need me to do? They spent the next hour moving through town, talking to people whose names appeared in the ledger. Not everyone was willing to help. Some were too scared. Some didn't believe the ledger was real. Some just didn't want to get involved. But enough people listened. Enough people got angry. By mid-morning, they had 6 people willing to stand up and testify to what the sheriff had done. It wasn't a lot, but it was something. Sarah was the last person they approached. She opened her door looking exhausted, a bruise on her cheekbone that she tried to cover with her hand when she saw them. "You need to leave," she said urgently. "Tom told me the sheriff put a reward on your heads, $50 for information leading to your arrest." $50? Colt raised an eyebrow. "I'm almost insulted. This isn't funny. Tom's out looking for you right now. Half the men in town are." "Sarah, we need your help," Mara said. "I can't. Your husband's name is in the sheriff's ledger, multiple times. He was paid to testify against other couples, paid to lie." Sarah's hand dropped from her cheek. "What?" Mara showed her the relevant pages. Sarah read them, her expression shifting from disbelief to something harder. "He told me he was doing civic duty," she said quietly, "that the sheriff needed honest men to help maintain order. He never said he was being paid." "The sheriff paid a lot of people," Colt said, "to do a lot of things. What do you want from me?" "We're confronting the sheriff, today, in front of as many people as we can gather. We need witnesses to confirm what's in this ledger. We need people to stand up and say what happened to them. Tom will kill me if I testify against the sheriff. You know that, right? He'll literally kill me." Mara took her friend's hand. "Then leave him. Come with us after this is over. You don't have to stay with someone who hurts you." "Where would I go?" "Anywhere, the ranch, another town. It doesn't matter. You just can't stay here." Sarah looked at her hand in Mara's, at the bruise on her own face, at the closed door behind her that led to a life she'd never wanted. When she looked back up, something in her expression had changed. "All right," she said. "I'll do it. But we do this now, before Tom gets back." They gathered their witnesses in the square, the same square where Mara had been chosen, where she'd danced with Colt, where she'd given her speech. It felt appropriate somehow, returning to the place where everything had started. Word spread quickly that something was happening. People came out of their houses and shops, curious about the commotion. Mrs. Chen had brought a small crowd from the bakery. John Reeves had rallied some of the stable workers. Others just appeared, drawn by the spectacle. Colt stood in the center of the square, the ledger held high. "I have something everyone needs to see," he called out. "Evidence of corruption. Evidence that Sheriff Garrett has been manipulating this town for his own benefit for years." "That's a lie," someone shouted. It was Tom Bradshaw, pushing through the crowd. "That man's a criminal. He broke into the sheriff's office." "I did," Colt acknowledged. "And I found this." He opened the ledger and began reading entries aloud. Names, dates, amounts paid, what was purchased with that money. The crowd grew quieter as he read, quieter and angrier. "This is ridiculous," Tom said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "You could have written that yourself." "Is that your signature?" Colt pointed to one of the entries. "Because it looks like your signature to me." Tom went pale. Other people began shouting questions, demanding to see the ledger for themselves. The crowd was turning, the mood shifting from curiosity to outrage. And then Sheriff Garrett arrived. He rode into the square flanked by his deputies, his face thunderous. "Disperse immediately," he commanded. "This is an illegal gathering." "Illegal?" Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "What's illegal is what you've been doing to this town. What you did to my marriage, to my family. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. You paid my husband to leave me so you could control who I married next. It's right here in your own handwriting." "That ledger is a forgery." "Then why are you so desperate to get it back?" Colt held it higher. "Why did you send deputies to poison our well? Why did you threaten Mrs. Chen's son?" The crowd murmured, shock rippling through them. "I never—" Garrett started, but John Reeves cut him off. "You ruined my daughter's life," the old man said, his voice shaking but loud. "You ran off the man she loved and forced her to marry a drunk who beats her. And now I know why. Because her intended husband owed you money he couldn't pay, so you got rid of him and sold her to someone who could." More people began speaking up, adding their own stories. People who'd been forced into marriages they didn't want. People who'd had loved ones run out of town on false charges. People who'd paid bribes just to keep the sheriff from destroying their lives. It was an avalanche. Once it started, it couldn't be stopped. Sheriff Garrett's face had gone from red to purple. "This is treason," he spat. "All of you, treason against lawful authority." "You're not lawful," Sarah said quietly. She stepped into the open space beside Mara, her bruised face visible to everyone. "You're just powerful, and you've used that power to hurt people. Mrs. Bradshaw, you should go home before—" "Before what? Before my husband beats me again for speaking out of turn? Before you pay someone else to lie about someone else? Before you destroy another family because they didn't do exactly what you wanted?" She was shaking, but she didn't back down. "I'm done being scared. We're all done being scared." The crowd erupted in agreement. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that the sheriff's authority was crumbling visibly. "Council!" Garrett shouted. "Council members, get out here! This is your town too!" Slowly, reluctantly, the council members emerged from their homes and businesses. Horace Pruitt looked deeply uncomfortable as he made his way to the center of the square. "What's going on here?" he demanded, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "This man has broken into my office and stolen private documents," Garrett said. "I demand he be arrested immediately." "And I demand the council examine these documents," Colt countered, "because they prove the sheriff has been manipulating marriages, accepting bribes, and falsifying charges for years." Pruitt looked at the ledger, then at the crowd, then at the sheriff. "Is this true?" "Of course not." "Then you won't mind if we examine it." "That's private property." "Private property obtained with public authority," another council member said. He was younger than the others, and he looked angry. "If there's proof of corruption, we need to see it." Colt handed over the ledger. The council members huddled together, reading through the pages. The crowd waited, the tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Pruitt looked up. His face was grim. "Sheriff Garrett, these are serious allegations, based on a forged document. Your signature appears on multiple pages, as do the signatures of several deputies and known associates." Pruitt closed the ledger. "Pending a full investigation, I'm suspending you from duty." "You can't do that." "I just did. Deputies, surrender your weapons and badges." For a moment, Mara thought the sheriff would refuse, thought he'd call for his men to fight, to force the issue. But even his deputies were looking uncertain now, exchanging glances. One by one, they unbuckled their gun belts and removed their badges, setting them on the ground. Sheriff Garrett stood alone, no longer backed by the authority he'd wielded for so long. He looked smaller somehow, older. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Yes, it is," Mara said. She'd been quiet through most of the confrontation, but now she stepped forward to stand beside Colt. "You don't control us anymore. Any of us." Garrett's eyes fixed on her with pure hatred. "You think you've won? You think exposing me changes anything? You're still the fat girl nobody wanted. You're still a joke." "Maybe," Mara said, "but I'm a joke who just took you down. So what does that make you?" The crowd laughed, not at her this time, but at him. And that, more than anything else, seemed to break him. Garrett turned and walked away, his back stiff, his head high. But everyone could see the defeat in the set of his shoulders. The crowd began to disperse, people talking excitedly, processing what had just happened. Mara felt suddenly exhausted, like all the adrenaline that had been keeping her upright had drained away at once. Colt put a hand on her shoulder. "You all right?" "I think so. Are you?" Getting there, he looked at the council members who were still examining the ledger and arguing among themselves. "We should probably stick around. They're going to have questions." They did have questions. Lots of them. Mara and Colt spent the next 2 hours answering inquiries, providing details, explaining how they'd found the ledger and why they'd taken it. Other witnesses came forward too, adding their testimonies to the growing pile of evidence against Garrett. By early afternoon, the council had heard enough. Pruitt announced that formal charges would be filed against the sheriff, that a new election would be held, that restitution would be made to families who had been harmed. It wasn't perfect. It didn't undo the damage that had been done. But it was justice, or as close to it as they were likely to get. When they were finally free to go, Mara and Colt walked back to their horses in silence. Sarah caught up with them before they could mount up. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "What will you do now?" Mara asked. "I don't know." Tom's going to be furious when he finds out I testified. I can't go home. Then don't, Colt said. Come back to the ranch with us. Stay as long as you need to figure things out. Sarah looked surprised. You'd do that? Why wouldn't we? I haven't exactly been a good friend to Mara. I stood by when people were cruel to her. I didn't visit when I should have. But you're here now, Mara said. That's what matters. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. They rode back to the ranch together, Sarah on a horse borrowed from John Reeves. The sun was setting by the time they arrived, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The ranch looked exactly as they'd left it. The broken window was still broken, glass still scattered on the floor. But it felt different somehow, safer, like they'd won back something that had been taken from them. Colt set about boarding up the window while Mara and Sarah cleaned up the glass. Then they made dinner together, a simple meal of bread and stew, and sat around the table eating in comfortable silence. After dinner, Sarah yawned. I should sleep. It's been the longest day of my life. Take Mara's room, Colt said. We'll figure out something else. Sarah looked between them. Where will you sleep? Mara and Colt exchanged a glance. They'd been so focused on the crisis, on surviving, that they hadn't thought about the practical reality of their living situation. I'll take the barn, Colt said finally. Don't be ridiculous, Mara said. It's your house. And you're my wife, technically. You should have the bedroom. We could share, Mara heard herself say. Then, mortified, not share, just both sleep in there, on opposite sides, with plenty of space between us, like we told the council we were doing. Sarah tried to hide a smile. I'll just go to bed now. Good night. She disappeared into Mara's room, leaving them alone. Colt cleared his throat. You don't have to do that. I know, but Sarah's in my room, and you're not sleeping in the barn, and we're both exhausted. Mara tried to sound practical about it, like it was no big deal. We're adults. We can share a space for one night without making it weird. If you're sure. I'm sure. They prepared for bed awkwardly, neither quite knowing where to look while the other changed. Colt's room was larger than Mara's, but still modest. A bed, a wardrobe, a small table. The bed was barely big enough for one person, let alone two. They lay down on opposite edges, a careful foot of space between them. Mara stared at the ceiling, hyper-aware of Colt's breathing, of the warmth radiating from his body, of how strange and terrifying and oddly comfortable this all was. Mara? Colt said quietly. Yeah? Thank you. For standing with me today, for not running when you had the chance. Where would I run to? This is my home. Is it? She thought about that. About the ranch, the work, the life they'd built here. About Colt himself, this complicated, damaged man who'd chosen her when no one else would, and then spent every day since proving that choice meant something. Yeah, she said. It is. They fell silent again. Mara expected to lie awake for hours, too wired to sleep, but exhaustion pulled her under within minutes. She woke once in the night to find herself pressed against Colt's side, his arm draped over her waist. For a moment, panic flared. Then she realized he was still asleep, his breathing deep and even. He'd moved closer unconsciously, seeking warmth or comfort, or just responding to the presence of another body in the bed. She should move away, put the distance back between them, maintain the careful boundaries they'd established. Instead, she closed her eyes and let herself stay where she was, just for a moment, just for tonight. When she woke again, dawn was breaking and Colt's side of the bed was empty. She found him in the kitchen, making coffee. Morning, he said, not meeting her eyes. Sarah's still asleep. Good. She needs the rest. They drank their coffee in silence. Then Colt said, About last night, it's fine. We were tired. It doesn't mean anything. Right. It doesn't. But the way he said it made Mara wonder if he believed that any more than she did. Sarah stayed with them for 3 days. On the 4th day, Mrs. Chen came to visit with news. Tom had left Red Hollow, just packed up and disappeared in the night, probably scared of what the investigation into the sheriff would reveal about his own activities. You're free, Mrs. Chen told Sarah. He can't hurt you anymore. Sarah cried then, relief and grief mixing together. She decided to stay in Red Hollow, to take over a small boarding house that had been vacant since its owner died. Mrs. Chen offered to help her get established, and several other women in town volunteered to pitch in. It wasn't the life Sarah had imagined, but it was hers, and that was enough. After Sarah left, the ranch felt quiet again. Mara and Colt fell back into their routines, but something had shifted between them. They stood closer when they worked. Their hands brushed more often. Sometimes Mara would catch Colt watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. And at night, when they retreated to their separate rooms, Mara found herself missing the warmth of his presence beside her. 2 weeks after the confrontation in the square, a letter arrived. It was from the council, officially clearing them of all charges and terminating the 6-month probation. Their marriage was recognized as legitimate, no further questions asked. They should have been relieved. They should have celebrated. Instead, they sat at the table and stared at the letter in silence. "I guess that's it," Colt said finally. "We're free." "Free," Mara echoed. "You could leave if you wanted. Go back to town. Start over somewhere new. No one's forcing you to stay anymore." "Is that what you want, for me to leave?" "No." The word came out fierce, almost angry. "No, I don't want you to leave. But I don't want you to stay just because you think you have to. See?" Mara looked at him. This man who'd chosen her, protected her, stood beside her through everything. This man who'd somehow become the most important person in her life without her quite realizing when it happened. "What if I want to stay?" she asked quietly. "Then stay." Even though the marriage was never real, even though we only got married because the sheriff forced us to, was it not real? Colt leaned forward. "We lived together, worked together. We chose each other, Mara. Maybe not at first, but somewhere along the way, we chose each other. That's more real than most marriages I've seen. But we're not—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Not what? Not intimate? Not in love?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I don't know what we are. I just know I don't want you to go." Mara's heart was pounding. "I don't want to go either." They looked at each other across the table, the air between them charged with something neither of them quite knew how to name. Then Colt stood abruptly. "I need to check the north fence. Be back before dinner." He left before Mara could respond. She sat alone in the kitchen, the letter still on the table, and wondered what the hell they were doing. They couldn't keep pretending forever. Couldn't keep living in this strange in-between space where they were married but not married, together but not together. Something was going to have to change. She just didn't know what. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the wall that separated her room from Colt's, listening to the house settle and creak around her. Everything felt wrong somehow, being back in separate rooms after that one night they'd shared, after everything they'd been through together. She got up and went to the kitchen for water. Found Colt already there, sitting in the dark. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "No." She sat down across from him, the table between them like it always was, like it had been since the beginning. "We need to talk about this." "About what?" "Don't do that. Don't pretend you don't know what I mean." Colt was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you want me to say, Mara?" "I want you to tell me the truth, about what you feel, about what you want." "I already told you. I want you to stay." "As what? Your ranch hand, your housemate, your pretend wife?" "I don't know." The words came out sharper than he probably intended. He stood up, paced to the window. "I don't know what this is. I'm not good at this." "At what?" "At feelings. At wanting things. At letting people close." He turned to face her. "My whole life, I learned that caring about people just gives them power to hurt you. My father beat that lesson into me young, and when my sister left, when she chose to go rather than stay with me, it just confirmed it. Colt, so I stopped caring. I stopped wanting. I built this ranch and I told myself that was enough, that I didn't need anything else." He moved back toward the table but didn't sit. "And then I chose you, and you stayed, and you worked, and you learned, and you stood beside me when you had every reason to run. And I started wanting things again, started caring again, and it terrifies me." Mara stood up slowly. "What are you saying?" I'm saying I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be someone's anything. I don't know how to be a real husband. You think I know how to be a real wife? Mara moved around the table toward him. I don't. I have no idea. But I know I don't want to keep pretending anymore. I don't want to keep sleeping in separate rooms and acting like this is just some arrangement of convenience. Then what do you want? I want this to be real. I want us to be real. Colt looked at her, his expression raw and vulnerable in the moonlight. I don't know if I can give you what you deserve. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to try. He reached out hesitantly and touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. What if I mess this up? Then we'll deal with it, together. He kissed her then, awkward and uncertain at first, like neither of them quite knew what they were doing, which they didn't. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that was enough. When they pulled apart, Colt rested his forehead against hers. I'm still scared. Me too. But you want to try anyway? Yeah, I do. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other until the first light of dawn started filtering through the windows. Then they went to Colt's room together, not to pretend, not to maintain appearances, but because they both wanted to, because they were done hiding from what they felt. The next few weeks were strange and wonderful and occasionally awkward. They were learning each other in new ways, not just as work partners or housemates, but as something more. Colt was still quiet and sometimes withdrawn, but he tried. He talked more about his past, about his sister, about the things that had shaped him. Mara told him about her childhood, about the years of feeling invisible and worthless, about how he'd changed that just by seeing her. They fought sometimes, about small things, stupid things, the way people do when they're figuring out how to live together as equals. But they always worked it out, always came back to each other. Sarah visited often, bringing bread from the bakery and news from town. The investigation into the former sheriff was ongoing, but Garrett himself had disappeared. Some said he'd gone to California, others said Mexico. Nobody seemed to care much either way. Red Hollow was changing, slowly, but changing. The new sheriff was a quiet man named Marcus Webb, who actually seemed interested in justice rather than power. The council had implemented new rules about marriage and courtship, making it illegal to force anyone into a choosing ceremony. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. And people's attitudes toward Mara were shifting too. Not everyone. There were still whispers, still judgments. But Mrs. Chen always smiled when she saw her. John Reeves tipped his hat. Even some of the women who'd laughed at her in the square now nodded politely when they passed on the street. It was more than Mara had ever expected, more than she'd ever hoped for. One evening, about 2 months after the confrontation in the square, Colt came home from town with a package wrapped in brown paper. What's that? Mara asked. Open it. Inside was fabric, beautiful blue fabric with a subtle pattern woven into it. Enough for a dress. Colt, this is too much. It's not. I saw it and I thought of you. He looked almost embarrassed. There's going to be another dance next month, a real one this time. Not the sheriff's mandatory thing, just people celebrating. And I thought maybe you'd want something new to wear. Mara ran her fingers over the fabric. It was soft and expensive and completely impractical for ranch life. It was perfect. You want to go to a dance? I want to go with you, if you want to. She looked up at him, this man who'd stumbled through their first dance with her and was now offering to do it again. I'd like that. The month passed quickly. Mara worked with Mrs. Chen to turn the fabric into a dress, simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a fitted bodice. When she tried it on for the first time, even she had to admit she looked good. The night of the dance arrived clear and warm. Mara put on the blue dress and did something with her hair that Sarah showed her. When she came out of the bedroom, Colt stopped mid-motion, his eyes wide. You look... He trailed off. Ridiculous? Beautiful. You look beautiful. Heat crept up Mara's neck, but she smiled. You don't look so bad yourself. They rode into town together as the sun was setting, painting everything in gold. The square was already full of people, lanterns glowing, music playing. But this time when they arrived, people didn't stare with malice. They nodded. They greeted them. Some even smiled. Sarah met them near the food tables, looking healthier than Mara had seen her in months. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, Mara said. That dress is stunning. Is it new? Colt bought the fabric. Sarah raised an eyebrow at Colt. Did he now? Don't start, Colt muttered, but there was no real heat in it. They got food and found a spot to stand and watch the dancing. Mara felt nervous energy building in her chest, anticipation mixed with old fears that were harder to shake than she'd like to admit. You all right? Colt asked quietly. Yeah, just thinking about the last time we danced here. We were terrible. The worst. Want to try again anyway? Mara looked at the couples moving in practiced rhythms across the square. What if we're still terrible? Then we'll be terrible together. He held out his hand. Come on. She took his hand and let him lead her to the edge of the dancing area. The music was slower this time, easier to follow. They found their rhythm, not perfect, not graceful, but better than before. They'd had practice, after all, dancing in the ranch house kitchen when the work was done and they were both too tired to care about making mistakes. See, Colt said. Not terrible. Just mediocre. I'll take it. They moved together, and Mara realized something. People were watching them again. But this time it wasn't with mockery or judgment. It was with something closer to curiosity, or maybe even approval. She caught Mrs. Chen's eye across the square. The older woman smiled and nodded. The song ended. Instead of leaving the dance area, Colt pulled Mara close and said, "One more? One more." The next song was faster, more complicated. They stumbled through it, laughing when they got the steps wrong, not caring who saw. Around them, other couples danced, some good, some bad, all of them just trying to enjoy the evening. When the song ended, someone started clapping. Then others joined in. Not the mocking applause from before, but real appreciation. For everyone who danced, including them. Mara felt something in her chest unwind completely. She'd been carrying tension for so long, years of it, decades maybe, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be relaxed, to be accepted, to just be. They danced 3 more songs before taking a break. Mara's feet ached and she was sweating, but she felt more alive than she had in years. Having fun? Colt asked, passing her a cup of water. Yeah, I really am. Good, because there's something I want to do. What? He took her hand and led her toward the center of the square, to the raised platform where speakers usually stood. Mara's stomach dropped. Colt, what are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago. He climbed onto the platform and held out his hand to help her up. She took it, confused and increasingly nervous. The music stopped. People turned to look. Evening, Colt said, his voice carrying across the square. I know I'm not much of a talker, so I'll keep this brief. Some of you know me. Most of you know my wife. He looked at Mara. When I chose her at that choosing ceremony months ago, it was probably the best decision I ever made, even if it didn't feel like a decision at the time. People laughed softly. Mara's worked harder than anyone I've ever met. She's learned things that would take most people years to learn. She stood beside me when things got dangerous, when it would have been easier to walk away. And she did it all while this town treated her like she was less than nothing. His voice hardened slightly. Some of you were part of that. Some of you laughed at her, mocked her, made her feel like she didn't deserve basic human dignity. The square had gone completely silent. I'm not saying that to make anyone feel guilty, Colt continued. I'm saying it because I want everyone here to know something. My wife is stronger, braver, and better than most people I've met, and I'm proud to stand beside her, not because of some forced ceremony, but because I choose to. Every day I choose to. He turned to Mara, and I want to make that choice public, in front of everyone. So there's no question, no doubt, no room for anyone to claim this marriage is anything other than what it is. He took both her hands. Mara Bell, I'm asking you. Not because anyone's forcing us, not because of town rules or sheriff's orders. I'm asking you to marry me, for real this time, because I want to, because I love you. Mara's breath caught. He'd never said that before. They danced around it, implied it, but never actually said the words. You don't have to answer now, Colt said quickly, misreading her silence. You can think about it. I just wanted you to know. I wanted everyone to know. Yes, Mara said. What? Yes, I'll marry you, for real this time. She squeezed his hands. Because I love you too. The square erupted in applause, real, genuine, enthusiastic applause. Not everyone was clapping. There were still skeptics, still people who thought they didn't belong together, but enough people were celebrating that it drowned out the doubters. Colt pulled Mara close and kissed her, and the applause grew louder. When they finally broke apart, Mara was crying. Happy tears, the kind she'd never thought she'd cry. "You couldn't have warned me you were going to do that?" she said, half laughing, half crying. "Would you have let me if I had?" "Probably not." "That's what I thought." They climbed down from the platform and were immediately surrounded by well-wishers. Mrs. Chen hugged them both. Sarah was crying happy tears too. Even some of the men who'd ignored Mara before came over to shake Colt's hand and offer congratulations. It wasn't universal acceptance. It never would be. But it was enough. It was more than enough. They stayed at the dance until late, talking and laughing and occasionally dancing some more. By the time they rode home, both of them were exhausted but happy. "So," Colt said as they dismounted at the ranch, "when do you want to do this? The real ceremony?" "Does it matter? We're already married by law." "It matters to me. I want to do it right this time. With witnesses we actually choose. With vows that mean something." Mara thought about it. "Next month? That gives us time to plan something small, just close friends." "Sounds perfect." They put the horses away together and went inside. The house felt like home now in a way it hadn't before, not just a place they lived, but a place they'd built together. That night, lying in bed with Colt's arm around her waist, Mara thought about everything that had happened since that day in the square. How scared she'd been. How certain she'd been that nothing good could come from being chosen by a man she didn't know. How wrong she'd been. "What are you thinking about?" Colt asked. "That day in the square, when you chose me." "Regret it?" "Not even a little." "You?" "Best choice I ever made." They fell silent, comfortable in the darkness. Then Mara said, "Your sister. Do you think you'll ever see her again?" "I don't know. Maybe. I've been thinking about trying to find her, tell her about you, about what happened here." He paused. "I think she'd like you. I'd like to meet her. Maybe we'll take a trip. After everything settles. Go to California and see if we can track her down." "I'd like that." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped around each other, already dreaming about the future they'd build together. The next month was a flurry of quiet activity. They didn't want a big ceremony, just something small and meaningful. Sarah helped Mara alter the blue dress to make it even more special. Mrs. Chen baked a cake. John Reeves offered to stand as witness, as did several other people from town who'd become unexpected friends. They held the ceremony at the ranch on a clear Saturday afternoon. The new sheriff officiated, reading vows that Mara and Colt had written themselves. They were simple vows, promises to stand together, to work together, to choose each other every day, even when it was hard. When it was time for rings, Colt pulled out 2 simple gold bands. "I had these made," he said, "from gold I've been saving for years. Wasn't sure what I was saving it for until now." Mara's hand shook as he slid the ring onto her finger. When it was her turn, she had to take 2 tries to get his ring on because her fingers wouldn't cooperate. But she managed it, and they were married, really married this time, by choice and by love. The celebration afterward was small but joyful. They ate Mrs. Chen's cake and drank wine that John Reeves brought, and someone pulled out a fiddle and played music while people danced in the yard. As the sun started to set, Sarah pulled Mara aside. "I'm happy for you, really happy. Thank you for everything, for standing with us when we needed it. You stood for me first, when you told me I could leave Tom, when you offered me a place to stay. You gave me courage I didn't know I had." She hugged Mara tight. "You deserve this. You deserve all of it." When the guests finally left and the ranch was quiet again, Mara and Colt stood on the porch watching the stars come out. "So," Colt said, "Mrs. Maddox, how does it feel?" "Like it did yesterday, and the day before, and every day since we started being honest about what this was." She leaned against him. "How does it feel for you?" "Like coming home, like I finally found the place I'm supposed to be." He kissed the top of her head. "With the person I'm supposed to be with." They stayed out there for a long time, talking about their plans for the ranch. about possibly expanding the horse breeding operation, about maybe taking that trip to California in the spring. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. Eventually, they went inside. As Mara was getting ready for bed, she caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked different than she had months ago, not physically, really, but in her expression, in the way she held herself. The woman staring back at her looked confident, strong, like someone who knew her worth. It had taken 23 years and one impossible choice to get here, but she'd made it. "You coming to bed?" Colt called from the other room. "Yeah, just a minute." She took one last look at her reflection, smiled, and went to join her husband. 3 months later, Sarah's boarding house was thriving. She'd fixed it up with help from Mrs. Chen and several other women in town, and it had become a refuge of sorts, a place where women could stay if they needed to leave bad situations, if they needed time to figure things out, if they just needed somewhere safe. Mara helped when she could, but she was busy with the ranch. They'd bought 2 new horses and were working on breeding them. Colt had taught her everything he knew about horses, and she was proving to have a natural talent for it. On a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, they were in town picking up supplies when they heard a commotion near the stage station. A stage had just arrived, and passengers were disembarking. One of them was a woman in her mid-20s with dark hair and Colt's eyes. Colt stopped walking, just stopped in the middle of the street and stared. The woman saw him. Her expression shifted from shock to something complicated, joy and fear and uncertainty all mixed together. "James?" she said. It was barely a whisper, but it carried. "Emma," his sister. They stood there for a long moment, neither moving. Then Emma took a tentative step forward, then another, and then she was running and Colt was running too, and they collided in the middle of the street in a hug that looked like it might break both of them. Mara stayed back, giving them space. She could see Emma crying, could see Colt's shoulders shaking. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, making up for years of distance and pain. Finally, they pulled apart. Emma saw Mara standing there and wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm making a scene." "You're fine," Mara said. "I'm Mara, James's wife." "Wife?" Emma looked at her brother in shock. "You're married?" "Yeah, just recently. Well, sort of. It's complicated." He reached for Mara's hand and pulled her forward. "Emma, this is Mara. Mara, this is my sister." "It's good to meet you," Emma said. "I got your letter last month, about what happened here, about the sheriff, and the corruption. And," she looked at her brother, "about how you found someone who saw past all your walls. You came because of the letter?" "I came because you asked me to, because you said you were sorry, because you said you'd changed." She smiled through her tears, "and because I wanted to see if my stubborn brother had really found someone crazy enough to marry him." "She is pretty crazy," Colt agreed, squeezing Mara's hand. "I'd have to be," Mara said. They took Emma back to the ranch and spent the evening talking. Emma told them about her life in California, about the boarding house she'd worked at, about the man she'd met and was planning to marry. She'd come to Red Hollow to reconnect with her brother, to see if they could rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy. There were years of hurt to work through, conversations to have, forgiveness to offer and receive, but they were both willing to try, and that was what mattered. Emma stayed for 2 weeks. By the time she left to go back to California, she'd made plans to return in 6 months with her fiancé. She wanted Colt to meet him, wanted to introduce him to her family, because that's what they were again, despite everything. Family. After she left, Colt was quieter than usual for a few days. Not in a bad way, just thoughtful. "You all right?" Mara asked one evening as they sat on the porch. "Yeah, just thinking about how different things are now. A year ago, I was alone. No family, no friends, no one. And now," he gestured around them, "now I have all of this. Have you. It doesn't feel real sometimes." "It's real. We're real. I know. It's just, I spent so long telling myself I didn't need anyone, that I was fine on my own, and then you came along and proved me wrong." "We proved each other wrong," Mara said. "You thought you didn't need anyone. I thought I didn't deserve anyone. We were both idiots." Colt laughed. Yeah, we were. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in impossible colors. Somewhere in the fields, the horses nickered to each other. A coyote called in the distance, lonely and wild. This was their life now. This ranch, this land, this partnership they'd built from nothing. It wasn't always easy. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with their own demons and insecurities, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. You know what I realized? Mara said. What? That day in the square, when you chose me, I thought it was the worst day of my life. I thought it was just another humiliation, another reminder that I wasn't good enough. And now? Now I know it was the best day of my life, because it was the day everything changed, the day I stopped being invisible. Colt turned to look at her. You were never invisible to me. I know, that's the point. She smiled. You saw me when no one else would, and that made me start seeing myself. I'm glad I chose you. I'm glad you chose you back. They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, until the sky was full of light. Inside, the house waited for them, warm and safe and home. Tomorrow, there would be work to do, horses to train, fences to mend. There would be trips to town and visits from friends. There would be challenges and setbacks and moments of doubt. But there would also be this, these quiet moments of peace and contentment, these reminders that they'd built something real and lasting out of the most unlikely beginning. Mara thought about the girl she'd been, standing in that square, waiting to be rejected, certain she knew how her story would end. That girl had been wrong about so many things, about her worth, about her future, about what love could look like when it showed up in unexpected places. If she could go back and tell that girl anything, it would be this. The man who chooses you when no one else will might just be the man you spend the rest of your life choosing back. And sometimes, being chosen by the wrong person in the wrong way at the wrong time turns out to be the rightest thing that ever happened to you. Ready to go inside? Colt asked. In a minute. I just want to stay here a little longer. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. And he didn't. He stayed right there beside her, solid and steady and true, while the night deepened around them and the stars wheeled overhead, and the life they'd built together hummed with quiet possibility. They'd been the unwanted ones, the girl no one chose, and the man who chose wrong. But together, they'd become something neither of them could have been alone. They'd become wanted. They'd become chosen. They'd become home. When they finally went inside, Mara took one last look at the ranch, at the fences they'd mended together, at the barn they'd rebuilt, at the land they'd worked until it was theirs in every way that mattered. This was their kingdom now, hard-won and precious, and she was done apologizing for claiming it. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night and the past and everything they'd survived to get here. And in the morning, they'd wake up and do it all again, work and laugh and stumble through this life they were building together, one imperfect day at a time. It wasn't the ending Mara had expected when she'd stood in that square all those months ago. It was better.